Hello, fellow cultists. This is DM Nell, and I'm back with another episode of Shadow the Demon Lord Talk. And this week we have a video that is updating my campaign diary. For those of you that are not into following along with my campaign, then catch you next time. But for those of you that are mildly interested in other people's campaigns, um, here's where we're at. So this is episode number 87, and what we'll be talking about is the adventure that we have just finished, which is Fine Country Folk. So, how did we get to Fine Country Folk? Well, when my last adventure wrapped up, the group had ended up in that was the Demon's Wet Nurse, and the group had ended up going back to Crossings. So I needed to get them out of Crossings and needed to get them on the road. So basically had an NPC that they had encountered in Ephraim's Fork offer them a job. And that NPC was former Inquisitor Randolphus, who you may know from Tales of the Demon Lord campaign. And Randolphus is looking for some people to help him. He is very battle scarred, and he is looking for some younger folks that can help be his field people, basically. So he offered the group a job to do that, and they seemed interested, but they needed to wrap up their affairs from the Demon's Wet Nurse. So they went back to Crossings, and they spent a little bit of time in Crossings, but I had to get them out of there. So things started happening in Crossings. I had there's a small group of clockworks that live in Crossings, and I had them visited by the Emancipator. Now, the Emancipator is a creation of mine that I brought into my previous campaign, and it is basically a prophet of the cog god. And the Emancipator is trying to free the clockworks from the stigma of slavery that they have, primarily in Lidge, but the problem persists throughout the Empire and in the Northern Reach as well. So that's the purpose of the Emancipator's existence, and also, of course, to spread the word of the cog god. So the Emancipator shows up and has this big meeting, but apparently somebody tipped off the Brown Cloaks in Crossings that this was going to happen, and of course the current Inquisitor there caught wind of this, so they raided the meeting. And of course, one of my PCs is a clockwork, and he had attended the meeting, so he got the hell out of there. So that was his desire to get out. And then I have a witch that is one of the player characters, and I had one of the NPCs in Crossings, Ezekiel, I believe is her name, and she is on the town council, and she is a witch. So I had her invite the player character witch to join her coven. He turned her down simply because he couldn't commit to being around, since he's mostly an on the road adventurer. But he finds out the next day that her coven that he had invited her, that he had been invited to, had been slaughtered that night as well. So somebody's gunning for witches in and around Crossings. This is kind of something that they learned when they first got there. So this is kind of his impetus to get the hell out. And then another one of my players got wind of a job opportunity in Sixton. So plenty of little seeds to get them out of Crossings. That was enough. They decided to go out of Crossings. And while on the road or on the road out of Crossings, they caught wind of this was actually the clockwork caught wind of in part of the meeting with the Emancipator, caught wind of a prophet of the machine god that has materialized, or there's rumors of a prophet of the machine god that had materialized somewhere in the Black Hills. And so that just south of Crossings. And so the Clockwork in my campaign decided that would be a good place to start their on the road campaign. So he talked the other group into going into the Lonely Vale to look for this machine god prophet. Now that wasn't the only seed that got them into the Lonely Vale. Another player character, a dwarf, who is an alchemist and also kind of dabbling in some other things. Part of his backstory is that he is destined to create a weapon that is going to save the world. And so I forget how I set it up. I don't know if he got a vision or a dream or what, but he caught wind of a rumor that this meteoric iron that he is needing to fashion his weapon was or could be found in the Lonely Vale. So he also wanted to go to the Lonely Vale to see if he could find the meteoric iron, which I'm calling blood iron, I think. And so that was enough to get them on the road and headed toward the Lonely Vale. So they stop by a small town, get directions to the Lonely Vale, and they head off. On the way, they encounter, I think it was a bear, fight the bear, and then they find their way into the Lonely Vale. So let me show you where they started off in the Lonely Vale here. All right, so I'm playing my campaign in Roll20. Not because I like Roll20. I mean, Roll20 is okay, but not for Shadow of the Demon Lord. I prefer using Foundry, but Foundry's modules were not updated to the current version of Foundry. And so I really didn't want to mess around with fighting errors in Foundry. So I went ahead and started my campaign in Roll20. Well, of course, since then, Foundry's been updated, this week, in fact. Not sure if I'm going to port my campaign back over into Foundry, or if we're just going to keep playing in Roll20. But we're in Roll20 right now. All right, so this is the map for the Lonely Vale, and it's mostly got Fog of War on it because it's a hex crawl. And I knew going into this that it was going to be a hex crawl, but here's the thing with hex crawls. I don't like them. They're too random, and it's difficult. It wastes a lot of time going from hex to hex with nothing happening other than random occurrences that have nothing to do with the story that you're trying to tell. So I really dislike hex crawls for that purpose. So I had to kind of guide them to the points in the Lonely Vale that have interesting things happening in them that further the story. Otherwise, this campaign or this adventure would last for 6 months, and I don't want it to last for 6 months. So we started off at the starting point in the Lonely Vale, and basically they followed the river for a ways until they encountered this naked dude kind of running across their path, and they kind of follow the naked guy into the woods. The naked guy apparently was running from somebody, and he was freaking out. He'd been tortured a bit, and so they had caught up with him. He was freaking out, but they managed to calm him down enough for him to say that he was being chased. But they really couldn't get much more out of him because he'd kind of lost it. So they decide to follow his trail to find out who's chasing him. But they get back to the river and they see a one-legged woman there, and that is the NPC that's in the adventure, Mary. And she invites them to spend some time in her cabin. But they decide to continue pursuing the trail of the naked man. So they turn down Mary, and she warns them about the locals, the fine country folk, but don't stay in the Vale long because you might get into trouble. So anyway, they didn't heed her advice, and they cross the river, and they go over to the right side of the map here, and they make their way. I had the trail go to the Fallen Tower, and in the Fallen Tower they encounter some clues. One thing is a dead body of a cultist of the Wandering Star had been in this valley and had died here. So they find his body, and they fight a large spider in the Fallen Tower. Also, while in the Fallen Tower, they encounter two women that enter the tower, enter the clearing where the tower is standing in, and this is Beulah and Maybelle, Clypper's daughters. And they kind of enter the Vale, or this, not the Vale, they enter this clearing where the tower is. The Clockwork goes out to talk to them, and they're pretty excited because, their dad, Clypper, likes to tinker with machinery. So they see this mechanical man walking around. They're all like, oh, this is exciting. But they were actually, on a quest, and they were trying to follow somebody that had gotten away from them, which of course is the naked man. And so my Clockwork guy wanted to follow them to see if they catch up with the naked dude, but the rest of the party decided they wanted to follow the two girls trail to see where they came from. So they talked the Clockwork into going that route, and so the Clockwork and the rest of the team start following the trail of the two girls. And so I had the trail kind of zigzag a little bit through the Vale, and they end up in the field of dead livestock. In hindsight, I probably would have left this out because it really didn't further the story along. I probably should have added something interesting if I was going to keep it in here, but basically it's just a field full of dead animals. The only weird thing about it is that they died many years ago, but they haven't decomposed. But there's no way really to tell that just looking at the corpses. They just look like fresh kills. So I guess it was supposed to freak them out, but it really didn't. It just kind of fell flat. So in hindsight, I would have left that out. But they did continue following the girls' trail, and they ended up in the camp of the beastmen. So they fight some beastmen, and I had a good little battle there. Nothing really of interest other than the fight. So they continue following the girls' trail, and that led them to Clypper's house. So when they got to Clypper's house, right before they got to Clypper's house, they encountered one of Clypper's maid betters, and he was captured by them, and he actually, this was before they got to Clypper's house. They encountered the maid better, and they made the maid better lead them to Clypper's house, which he did. And in the yard of Clypper's house, and let me see if I kept the map here. I did. All right, so I created this map of Clypper's house, and the maid better had brought them here. So when they got here, there was a maid better that was chopping wood in the front yard. And so they kind of they got the drop on him, and they convinced him through magic with a command spell to run away. So it started running away, but it encountered another maid better because they're crawling all over the place in this part of the Vale. And so the other maid better is like, "Where are you going?" And of course, I had to act it out hillbilly style. So I tried to pull my best Beverly Hillbillies and what I could recall of the Chainsaw Massacre type movies that I've seen, with the ridiculous Southern hillbilly drawl. So all of that was poured into the scene, and so the player characters ended up fighting some maid betters. Well, I decided that those weren't going to be a challenge because I got 5 player characters and experienced players running them. So this was not going to be a challenging encounter at all, as written, because the maid betters are kind of spread out, and quite frankly, they're not that tough. And at this point, my player characters are third level. And so I decided that I was going to make not only have made betters, but I was going to make made betterers, which would be larger made betters. So the made betters, for those of you that don't know the adventure, the made betters, Clipper basically has a relic in his possession, and that relic is the hide of a cabalist from the cabal of the Black Sun, which is a cult that's featured in the Black Sun. What's the name of that? I did a video on it, so excuse me for a moment because it's going to drive me nuts if I don't find it here. But setting. Black Sun Dawn. Okay, that's it. The Black Sun Dawn. So the Cabal of the Black Sun Dawn is where this cabalist came from. And you know, if you have read this this supplement, they have cabalists everywhere because the Black Sun Dawn, they're trying to prevent they're not really prevent, but they're trying to ingratiate themselves with the cosmic entities that they had inadvertently drawn their attention. And so when the cosmic entities arrive, the Black Sun Dawn want to be sure that they survive and become servants of the new overlords. So they have people out doing random, different, weird activities that's supposed to further their cause, based off of the writings of the Black Sun manuscript. So one of the Kabbalists went to the Vale 30 years ago, and Clypper and his brother Semon, yeah, I know, they came across this Kabbalist, killed him, and skinned him because he had interesting inscriptions all over his. Well, the inscriptions were from the Black Sun manuscript, and so they basically skinned him, cut the skin in half, and they each took half of the skin to learn what the writings on the skin, or the engravings on the skin, or the inscriptions on the skin, I should say, meant. And so this is what started their feud, because once both of them took half of the hide, they wanted the whole thing for themselves, and they didn't want their brother to get the other half, so they started feuding with each other, which is the whole story of this Vale, is a feud between Clypper and Semon. Clypper, he took the half that had a technomancy inscription on the hide, so he learned technomancy, and he used that knowledge to create made betters, which basically he would use his own family, but he would also find other people and create, and take their human parts off and replace them with machine parts, so they're half human and half machine. So essentially he made fantasy cyborgs and under his control, and so he made betters, which are just normal human size, and then I wanted to create made betterers to make a larger creature to be a little bit more effective. And I found some pretty cool tokens to use in Roll20. You can see this is one of my made betterers. He's got a flamethrower there. That was pretty cool. So anyway, the battle became pretty much throughout the yard, and Clypper himself was back here in his work shed. Now, in the adventure, the work shed is actually off camera. It's further into the woods, but I didn't want that to be a separate scene, so I put the cabin right next to the house. So his workshop is right here, and with the fight going on out here, that drew Clypper's attention. So I drew Clypper out and had him join the fray. And of course, the battle was decided by the player characters. They threw Clypper into this fire pit here that the made betters were burning things. trash probably. And so the first half of the adventure was concluded at Clipper's house with Clipper's death. They find the skin, and one of the player characters, the dwarf alchemist, decides that he wants to read the skin, and so he did. He got corruption, and he learned he already knew technomancy, but he learned the other tradition from that half of the skin, and he became corrupt, which started worrying the Clockwork PC because he's been kind of eyeballing the evil activities here, and he's kind of the moral compass of the group, and he doesn't like seeing this team going in the direction it's going, towards the dark side. So after the dwarf got corrupted by the skin, he really decided he made a deal with the dwarf that if they find the other half, that he would carry it, and not the dwarf. And the dwarf was fine with that. So the rest of the group rest up here. They find some captives inside the house, and they rest, and they decide to leave and find the other half. So they go back to the Lonely Vale map, and they knew that from the people in the house, they knew that his brother was on the other side of the river. So they decided to cross the river, and that's where they encountered the cabalist remains, surrounded by a group of hoods who were trying to carry the corpse away. For whatever reason. So they fight the hoods, kill them off, and then they follow a trail of prints and find a bunch of cultists that are pushing around a local yokel. And so they fight the cultists, which of course are more Kabbalists from the Black Sun Dawn that were here to recover the Kabbalists that had been skinned. And so they ordered the hoods to get the body on a stretcher and to join them as they look for the hide. And so they were doing their own thing when they ran across this local yokel. So they started questioning the local yokel, and that's when the PCs came upon them questioning or pushing this guy around. So they fight the cultists. The local yokel runs off, and when they are done fighting the cultists, they follow the yokel to Semon's house. And so when they get to Semon's house, again, they manage to get to Semon's yard. And let me see if I can find that map here. So we've got Semon's yard, and again, they had some of Semon's kin out in the yard. So they decided they're going to try to get a drop on them. But the local yokel that got away had actually come and actually, let me back up a little bit, because the local yokel that got away got to the house first, warned the other kin, Semon's kin, that were in the yard, that these people were after him, and so they hid out in the surrounding brush. So when the player characters come in, they just saw there were 3 pit bulls just sitting in the yard. So they were going to try to sneak up to the house. When they did, the yokels pop out of the woods and fight. So this was the scene of a big fight between the what do they call it in the book here, inbred yokels, and of course, for the inbred yokels, I included Mima's favorites. And then, like I did with Clipper, I knew this wasn't going to be a very difficult fight based off of the stats for the Mima's favorites and the inbred yokels. So I made a Mima's favorites, which were larger versions of Mima's favorite. And so the fight was it was a pretty good fight. It wasn't deadly by any means, but I think it was a bit of a challenge. Semon actually he kind of looked out the window and started firing on them with a rifle, which I thought was funny. So the fight in the yard concluded. They storm the house, go up and fight Semon. I think that was on the second floor. That was not super challenging just because it was a bunch of them on Semon, and it wasn't really much of a fight. But by this time, we had been like 6 sessions into this adventure, and I felt like it was time to start wrapping it up. So I didn't really beef up Semon for that reason, and I didn't bring in any more of his kin, which, you know, there were others I could have brought in and should have brought in to make the fight tougher. But like I said, I felt like it was time to wrap things up. So they fought Semon. They managed to kill him fairly easily, and they found the second part of the hide. And that's where we wrapped up the Fine Country Folk. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get to a lot of what was in the written into the adventure. We did not get to the A Horror in the Hole. We didn't get to the Fire in the Stone. And so they didn't encounter the abomination. They didn't encounter the seraphim that was hiding out, and you know, some of the random encounters that they could have encountered, they didn't, which is fine because those things really didn't further the story of the campaign that I'm currently running. So those are more kind of distractions than anything else. But you know, I felt like 6 sessions was pretty. It was long enough, and actually when they finished the Clipper part, we'd been 3 sessions into getting there, so I went ahead and leveled them up to 4th level, or I leveled them up to, sorry, they came into this at 2nd level, and then leveled up to 3rd level at Clipper's house, after Clipper's house, and so now they have leveled up to 4th level. So sorry about that. So they ended this adventure at 4th level. And so so now we're in between adventures, and they're trying to figure out what to do with the 2 hides, whether they are going to join them together, keep them apart. And it's kind of causing some friction between a couple of the PCs because the Clockwork doesn't want them joined together. He believes that it's going to corrupt the dwarf even further, and he's concerned about that. So we're kind of in the midst of that discussion, which we're having offline in Discord, and hasn't actually wrapped up yet. We're still in the discussion phase. So that's where we're left off. So where does it go from here? Well, we don't know. There's some seeds that have been planted, both from a Black Sun Dawn perspective, and also from the earlier 2 adventures that they had discovered that a celestial body had appeared in the sky, a wandering star that had caught the attention of the cult of the wandering star. Those were in the earlier adventures. If you watch my my earlier campaign diaries, and so they know that there is this entity called Atropos that is approaching Earth. They don't know what it's going to do, but they believe that it's not going to be a good thing. And so there's several things that's going on. There's the Black Sun Dawn, there's the stuff going on with the Machine God and the Cog God. So this adventure could go a few different ways, and waiting to see what the characters will end up deciding to do. So that's pretty much it for the campaign diary. That's where we're at. Getting ready to start a 4th level adventure, and we'll talk about that after we conclude it. So hope you enjoyed this. If you like my videos, please subscribe to them. And otherwise, I will catch you next time. So hail the Demon Lord. How do you turn this damn thing off?